Okay, so we're gonna make this little frog. I haven't actually made one yet. I've cut one out over here, but I haven't successfully made one yet. So this will be new for me as well, and we'll figure it out as we go. So I cut out my pattern template. Here's the one side of the frog, and then here's the other side. I've made marks here and here. These dots are going to signify this seam being left open. And we're going to do that so that we can close up the frog later. So when I am drawing this, so I'm not going to use pens for this because there's so many details and angles. I'm just going to outline it with my fabric pen to get where I need to cut. And then for this one, you do it both sides. So, and like I said, I've already cut this one out for this side of the frog, and these two little dots right here are for buttons for eyes. So for this part of the frog, you just start off like this, and I have it lined up on grain. See how I have my print orientation, kind of shows me where I need to be. So I have my frog lined up on there, and then I am going to do the same thing over here. Trace around the frog all the way around. I'm going to draw this line right here in the middle is where I cut, but so that I utilize all my fabric, I'm going to flip it like that and keep drawing the rest of it. And then when I cut it out, I have something like this. So, all right, so that's how I get these fabric pieces for my frog. Now I need to cut this one in half. So I'll redraw my line over here. My disappearing ink pen probably vanished overnight when I cut these out yesterday. So there's that. I'm also going to mark where these dots are. So to do that, I'm going to take a pin and I'm going to push down through the dot on the other side. See, there's my pin right there. And I'll make a big mark right there. And then same thing on this side. Push my pin in, lift up my paper, and mark where that is. And now I'm going to cut this in half. Now I have this as a 1/2 inch seam allowance right here. Everything else is a 1/4 inch seam allowance. But this down the middle is a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and it's really important to get it just right. So I'm actually going to use my ruler and draw a 1/2 inch. So if I flip it and I put this line next to here, I can see that it's up next to the 1/2 inch. Oop. And I'm going to go all the way like that. So there's that 1/2 inch, and here's this 1/2 inch. And then mark where my dots are. All right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew right sides together, and I'm only going to sew, I'm going to match this up really nice. I'm only going to sew from here to here and from here to here. I'm going to leave this open, and then I'm going to iron it up. All right, so let's go to the machine and sew that. And this is a really small project, so I don't even have it pinned, but it looks like it's all lined up pretty good. And I'm just sewing this portion of it right here. I also set my stitch length to a 2 because I want really small stitches with this, because it's going to be filled with rice or plastic pellets or, you know, whatever kind of stuffing material. So I want the stitches to be really, really small. Clip on the threads. Ah, come here. There we go. All right. So now you can see I have that little opening right there. So I'm going to iron that open. Like this. And I think I can finger press it. This fabric's pretty stiff. So I'm just gonna finger press it. So I'm just using a lot of pressure in my fingers. There we go. Pretty good for finger pressing. I'll give it one more little drag. There we go. All right, cool. Didn't even have to iron that. Depends on the fabric. This fabric, like I said, is pretty stiff. It's not particularly soft. Gotta plug the iron in. All right, there we go. We'll get the iron going. Okay. Now, here's where the pins will come in. So I'm going to do right sides together for this frog. Match up everything. So this frog, as you know, has a lot of little angles and corners. An accurate cut is really important. So notice too how I just kind of manipulated the fabric a little bit to lay where I wanted it to lay. Okay. Pin here. Gonna put in just a few pins, not a ton, because it's such a small little thing. All right, good enough. Let's take it in the machine. All right. So I'm just going to start anywhere really, because I'm going to sew around the whole part. So I'm just going to start on a nice straight part so I don't have to worry about it as much. Now the seam allowance for this is 1/4 of an inch, which falls really closely to about the center of my presser foot. It depends on your presser foot and your machine. Sometimes it's all the way to the edge right here. Sometimes it's a little bit less. Yeah, it's kind of right along that edge. All right. Back stitch. I'm actually going to do a 2.5 on this fabric. I wouldn't do any more than a 2.5. 2 or a 2.5 stitch length. The reason why I switched to a 2.5 stitch length for this fabric, because like I said, it's really stiff, this fabric is, and if I do a bunch of very small concentrated stitches in it, I actually run the risk of like perforating the fabric. It can actually cause a tear in the fabric by putting too many stitch holes in it. So notice when I'm going around the edge of this foot, I do like 2 or 3 stitches at a time, lift up on this presser foot, and then readjust to get my angle. So there's lots of pivoting going on. A few stitches, and I use my hand wheel to make sure that the needle goes back in the down position so that Because see right here, see how my needle's up? If I lift it up right here, I'm losing that stitch. It can move around, see that? Uh-oh, don't do that. Now I gotta kind of figure out where to get back in after showing you that. But always make sure your needle is down when you pivot. Let me get there we go. It wants to blur. I moved it too quickly, I think. Okay, let's see. And again, just turn that hand wheel. I don't want to get too close, too far away from that 1/4 inch seam allowance, because I want a nice space for my seam allowance for my seam quality. If the seam is too close to the raw edge of the fabric, it weakens your seam. Feet. Now this angle right here is going to be hard. I'm actually going to put a mark. This is just a regular pin too. I'm going to put a mark about where the corner I need to get there. And I'm going to do the same on this side too, because this angle is so deep. See what I mean? Make sure my head is lined up well. There's a little bit of space right here, so I'm just going to try to compensate for that. Go a step further. One more. There we go. So I just kind of moved the fabric with my finger when I unpinned to try to match up. There we go. There. Yeah, just got myself with the pin. It happens. Almost there. There we go. Trim my threads. All right, This next part is a little tricky with this, but this is one of the reasons why I wanted you guys to do this frog, is because we have to clip notches and clips in this frog. See all these curves and angles? If we don't clip and notch the fabric, it will not lay right once you flip it inside out. So on inside corners, you do a clip, which is just a little snip. See how it's really close right here? But I'm not getting too close to the seam. Don't get too close to the seam, just do it like that. And then on these outside curves, you do notches. So you actually cut little triangles out of those curves. And that helps make space for the fabric, because the knee, this fabric is going to get bunched up inside this knee on the inside. So when you make notches like that, it makes space so that when it goes inside, it actually joins together like this. And then you don't have bulk. And opposite is true of this. When this fabric goes inside, it needs to spread out. So that's why you do clips, just little cuts on the inside curve so that it can spread out. So this toe has quite a lot of curves. And then the heel. I'll do one more on that heel. I'll do 2 little clips on that inside. Up here in the butt, I'll do a little clip here and there. Clip there. The most important thing with the notches is that you don't cut through your seams and you don't get close. You need to be a good 1/16 away so you don't compromise the quality. And you don't have to do the straight parts. See how this is straight right here? I don't have to worry about that. I'm only worrying about the curves. Like all that right there, I don't have to do anything to that. I'm just gonna leave it. All this right here is fine. Even though it curves, it's just slightly, so it's not really important. Here's a hard corner. So the hard corner, you do the same thing you did on the pillows, where you clip the corners like that. Be careful to cut very precisely. I'm not compromising those corners. See, I'm about a good 1/16 of an inch away from each of those. And then right in here, definitely got to get that. Don't want to get too close. And then I'll just do a few notches around the head. I'll get rid of this bulk right here from the seam. See that? So I'll just kind of trim down that bulk so I don't have 3 layers. Do the same thing to this little corner right here with this, the butt fabric. There. And let's see. I'll do one right here. I'm hesitant to do one here because I don't want it to compromise much, so I'll just do a little one on each side. There. I need to clip that corner. I'm just double checking. That's my dog. There we go. All right. So now we can flip it through this nice little opening. That's another reason why it's really important to backstitch very well here and here, because we're going to use this hole to flip it, and all these little parts to flip is pretty difficult. So be patient with yourself, and actually a pencil will be a good assistant for this as we flip it. So start off and just do one hem at a time. Feet are rather long, so I'll get and don't be too rough with it because you don't want to accidentally rip any of your seams when you're flipping this. I'll use my pinky because it's smaller. Still so difficult. All right, pencil. Here we go. Not even pointy. There we go. I'm trying to be as gentle as possible. Because like I said, I don't want to accidentally rip my fabric, rip my seam. Okay, I'll get those little feet out in a minute. Okay. Now this part where it's getting really tangled in on itself, instead of pushing it from the inside out, I'm going to try to pick at it with a pin. So I'm going to very gently try to poke through my fabric like this and just kind of lift the fabric into place. There we go. Here comes that little corner. This is another reason why we have a 1/4 inch seam allowance on this, because I think if you had a bigger seam allowance in here, it would be really bulky on the inside. All right, I'm satisfied with that for that little frog end. Foot, I mean. All right, do little hands. Let's come down here to the foot. There we go. Kind of digging at it a little bit harder. Is it blurry? Mm-hmm. All right, so I got my little feet picked out as much as I possibly could. Pretty good. And see how the curves of the feet and the legs with the seams, they now are kind of laying nice and flat. There's not, if you have a bunch of crinkles that are coming out of these curves, without having to flip it all the way, because that was hard to flip those legs out. So make sure you do your clips and notches right the first time so you don't have to undo it again. You can take a look at the inside and see if anything needs to get clipped a little bit more. Just be careful when you do it, because once you cut it, you can't put it back. But I'm pretty satisfied with that. It's a little wrinkly right here, but I think once it gets filled with rice, it'll lay out well. Okay, so now, let's see, poke out my head a little bit. I'll probably iron it just a little bit to get it really nice and crisp. Pretty good. All right, so now's the time when you would sew on the buttons. And I kind of have, with my pattern, it kind of looks like eyes right here. Let's take a look at this, where the button should be. So remember, this is, let's see how it lines up with the seam allowance that it did. Pretty good. That could come out a little bit more. You see that? See how there was so much missing on the heel right there? And then I looked in my seam and I see there's actually a lot more fabric right in there. So then I can just slide my pin in there and kind of pick it out. There we go. Now he's got more of a heel. Okay, cool. Button time. So the buttons for this really do line up right where these little pattern pieces are. Another thing you can do is to try to get the placement of the eyes, because I forgot to mark it when I had the pattern piece out. Just kind of eyeball with a pin where they would be based on just flipping it right side up. So I'll just mark it right there. And then, but like I said, they kind of fall in line with where the pattern is, but that's where I'm going to put my buttons. So you sew on tiny, I'm going to use 2-hole buttons, I think, because 2-hole buttons are usually a little bit smaller. I'm going to put 2 2-hole buttons here and here for eyes. Okay, you can stop recording. Okay, so I got my one button on. So since the back of this fabric isn't going to show it all, I am going to put the knot on the back side rather than the front side, like we had taught, like we did before with our button exercise. So I have a double thread, just for reference here. I have a double thread. It's about 16 inches long, and sewing these little buttons on is a little tricky because you don't have a ton of room to work with. So I insert my thread in from the bottom, and then I'm going to do little X's so they kind of look like little eyeballs. And when I go in, there we go, I'm going to go in here, and instead of pulling it all the way throughout the back, I'm just going to loop it back up through the front. That I found to be the easiest to sew the button on. And then once it's through the front like that, let's see, blurry, so blurry. There we go. Perfect. I'm gonna then loop it through that hole again with no fabric. I'm just looping the button because I already looped through the fabric. Go back in and just repeat that step. Probably a good 4 times for each crisscross. I want to make sure my buttons are nice and secure. All right, and then to go to the other crisscross, instead of going through the fabric, I'll just go right into that next hole so I can continue my crisscross over here. I'm going to rotate my little frog. Remember, make your project work for you. So hold it however makes sense for you to do your best work. Oh, get out of there. There we go. Up to here. Like that. And I'm just kind of pulling taut. I'm not going super tight. I'm not going loose. I'm just doing it. I'm pulling it so that I have a nice pressure because I don't want these buttons to fall off. All right. So there's my little eyes. And so now in the base, let's see, where am I here? I'll go in one more time, and when I go down, I'm going to come out this back side. Give it a nice tug, and then I will knot off back here. And when I knot off, same thing as before, I'm going to grab my stitches. Ooh, that's real tight. Let me go over here. There we go. Grab some of my stitches, some of my fabric, loop it, knot it, and I'm going to do that 3 times because I know my kids are going to play with this and I want the buttons to be really secure. One more time. Because the knot is already in the back, I don't have to worry about burying the thread. I can just cut it. So this is what my buttons look like on the inside of this little frog. And then there's the little eyeballs. So cute. All right. So now let's fill them up with rice. So this is how, where'd my rice go? There's my rice. This is how I think this is going to be easiest. I put some rice in this bag. I don't have a funnel or anything, but I'm going to clip the corner of this bag and I'm going to fill the frog that way, and I got my pins handy so I can sew it. And then how we're going to stitch this middle part up is we're going to do a ladder stitch. This is a super duper, oh wait, no, I'm not opening this. I'm clipping a corner. Whew. All right, paper scissors, not fabric scissors. These used to be fabric scissors and then I ruined them, so now they're paper scissors. I'm going to cut a very small hole in the corner and start filling him up. Is that hole too small? That hole is too small. So a little bit bigger. Hopefully this won't make a huge mess. Ah, there we go. There we go. All right. Gonna adjust. I'm gonna do his legs first. There we go. Just kind of shift the rice down. What? It does not want to get down to that foot. There we go. There we go. There. Nice stuffed frog leg. I know, I'm saying dumb things. My niece, Milena, is helping me film, which I greatly appreciate. And she snickers at all the dumb things I say. That's okay. Totally aware. All right. Now I'll get the little arms. There we go. You could probably use actual stuffing in this too. But I like the idea of it being. There's my hole. That'll probably do it. Let's see. A little bit more. Just a little bit. There. All right. So you see how full my bag was? That's how much I have left over. That looks to be about, I don't know, a third of a cup, half a cup maybe. All right, so now I gotta stitch them closed. I'm not gonna pick it up, that's for sure. I'm just gonna slide them to the edge here. Get my chair so I can be nice and steady. Okay, here's the ladder stitch. Thread, and I'm going to use this dark gray thread again so you can see it. And I got, you know, arm's length, how we talk about, for a hand needle and thread, single strand, knotted it. Okay, this is a ladder stitch. This is a super duper common hand stitch. So I'm going to start where I take the needle and I'm going to go under this fold of my seam allowance and I'm going to try to pick it up just where I left off, which is right around there. A little bit further. There we go. Perfect. Okay, now my knot is now hidden in this fold. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to insert my needle into the fold on the other side and I'm going to move my needle just a little bit along this hard folder in here. And I'm going to come out just on that fold. Get out of the pin and pull. Now I'm going to go to the other side directly across. So from here to here, directly across, and do the same motion. where I gently catch a single layer of fabric, scoot it through the center of that fold, and come out about 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch away. The reason why I'm doing it really concentrated with this is because there's rice in there and I want the seam to be really concentrated. I'm also going to leave this open so that you can see the pattern of this. I'm not going to pull it yet. You'll see what happens when I pull it. So then same thing. I come across the way, get the other fabric through the fold like that. And then you just do that all the way down. And if you can't quite catch it in the fold, I'm having a hard time with this because of the angle. There we go. Just be patient. Sometimes it takes a little bit of manipulation. So you see why this is called the ladder stitch? Because it kind of looks like a ladder. So after this stitch, I'm going to pull it so y'all can see what happens. Alright, so now I'll just gently pull this and then look. Ta-da! A beautiful, invisible hand stitch seam. Now because this is filled with rice, and if it busts open, we're in trouble, I am going to do a knot midway down. And what I mean by that is when I do this one, I'm going to go a little bit behind. So I'm not going directly across, I'm doing it a little bit. Well, I guess I could go right behind. I mean right across. Okay. I'm going to go right across. Catch just a little bit. And this time when I pull it, I'm getting tangled in the arm. There we go. This time when I pull it, I'm going to thread that loop just as if I was knotting it. Now, I want to make sure my seam up here is really good and secure before I pull the knot, because I'm not going to be able to pull that part anymore once I pull that knot. Alright, so I got that part secure. And now we'll just keep going. The arm. It's kind of like I'm doing surgery on this little frog belly. Okay, I'm going to give it a slight pull. There we go. Almost done. Gonna loop that knot so I can knot that part of the seam. I'm gonna see if there's, did I get all the way? Yeah, I got all the way to the end. So now I'm gonna knot off. And I'm gonna knot off a couple times. And then this one, you want to bury your thread. So I'm just going to insert it in there. Give it a little snip. All right. And he's done. See that ladder stitch? You can kind of see some of the details. If I pull it apart a little bit, because I'm not using red thread, I wanted y'all to be able to see it really well. And there we go. All done.